So, yes, change your life, learn to meditate. So, this week, I'm going to be exploring how self awareness can change your life, how self awareness can change your life. And we'll just explore a little bit about what self awareness is, because I don't think it's what you think it is. Um, and if we can explore self awareness in the context of meditation and mindfulness, I think we can find that it will um, enable us to really become free of limiting ideas that we have about ourselves and our world that really sort of constrain us, limit us. Last week, Artist City began the series with an exploration of how body awareness can change your life. And he explored that in the context of the meditation practice called the Metta Bhavana. And he was exploring how, through body awareness, we can come into a more kind of authentic, more connected relationship with our true purpose. We transcend habits of mind and body and connect with our true purpose. And during that class, Artist City said something that was quite startling, I thought. And that was that there is no breath. So, in a class of mindfulness of breathing, Artist City said at the very beginning, of course, there is no breath. There's only awareness of breathing. So it's awareness of how the breath inhabits the body. That is the breath. There isn't any kind of breath itself, actually. It's not a thing. We call it by a name, but it's not really a thing. It's a process. And we can explore that process by coming into an awareness of the direct experience of that process of breathing on the body. And this week, I'm going to be looking at self-awareness in the context of a practice called the Metta Bhavana, or loving kindness, the cultivation of loving kindness. So exploring self-awareness in the context of this meditation practice in which we're cultivating loving kindness for ourselves and for other beings. And I suppose I could say the same thing in a way. There is no self. There is no self per se. There's only this awareness of self. Self is a set of processes. It's an ever-changing, dynamic set of processes that we sort of think of as me, myself, I. But actually, where is this me, myself, and I? Where does it actually exist? I think we do feel it in the body, as well as in the mind, in the emotions. I think we do. At least I think I do. I wonder what your experience is, and I encourage you to sort of really explore that in your meditation. Is there a direct experience of the self? How does it feel to be you? And in a way, self manifests in wanting things, desiring things. A sense of self manifests in pushing things away. Maybe a sense of self manifests in the imagination as well. We imagine ourselves into being. And we can get into all sorts of habits of self. We get into habits of self. We think we know who we are. We think we know what we like. We think we know what we don't like. And we sort of become dead to that in a way. We become subject to this experience of self rather than being able to sort of take a perspective on it. And that is what we are aiming to do in meditation, is coming into a detached but feeling full relationship with this experience of self. In a way, this is, the absolute sort of core of what the Metta Bhavana practice is all about. So I was thinking about that, thinking about how that works in my experience. And there are 5 stages to the practice. So we begin by bringing ourselves to mind. We begin by bringing this sense we have of ourselves to mind, this experience we have of ourselves to mind. Being friendly, being curious, and being kind of mindful, noticing how this sense of self inhabits the body, the mind, the emotions. And then in the second stage, we seek to expand this sense of self to take in awareness of another person, a good friend, someone who we find it easy to like. So then there's 2 things we're doing there. We're expanding our sense of awareness of self, and we're also taking advantage of the friendliness that we feel towards this friend of ours. And in the third stage, we expand it out even further to the neutral person or the familiar stranger. And so the idea, or one of the principles of the practice, is to explore these boundaries between my sense of self and my sense of other. And we use that the friendliness we feel towards our good friend as a bridge. And then we take the inspiration of that friendliness out to this familiar stranger. And then in the 4th stage, we bring to mind someone we find difficult. Traditionally, it's called the enemy, but it's quite dangerous to refer to this 4th stage person as the enemy because of this habitual nature that we have of just sort of projecting out onto the externals things that actually are properly our own. So it's kind of useful to think of this person as someone that I find difficult. So in that sense, I'm then taking responsibility for the difficulty, which is an important element of the practice. And then we just take it further and further out to all beings, all creatures. So Metta Bhavana, this practice of cultivating loving kindness, involves active recollection combined with a mindfulness of your bodily, emotional experience, the feelings, the sensations, the thoughts that arise as you recollect these objects of the meditation. And all of that is part of a sort of, if you like, project of exploring this experience of self, this how we can expand our awareness of self to include others, and how our relationship with others impacts upon our sense of self. So I'm just going to tell you a little anecdote in a way to sort of help illustrate this kind of mindfulness of self, how it's kind of manifested in my life recently. So I think sometime in January or February, I decided that I was going to build a raised bed in my back garden. I had this dream of growing vegetables, which has always been something I've wanted to get into, and I've never really had the opportunity. And I've moved into this house with a brilliant big garden. And so I thought, yeah, this is my chance. So it sort of began with me, began with this idea. And then I invited some friends, Liz being one of them, to come and help me build it. And then I've been growing vegetables. I mean, it coincided fabulously with the lockdown for me. It meant that I had plenty of time to devote to this raised bed. And that's what I've been doing all summer. Yes, you could even say that neutral people were involved in delivering the bits and pieces that I needed to put the raised bed together. And then something quite interesting happened. Well, I think it was quite interesting. I started to sort of do my weeding, and I was talking to my housemate, my friend, about these little bugs that live on the leaves. And my friend said, "Oh, that is a ladybird larva. That is the larva of a ladybird." And I thought, "Oh, how cute, lovely little sort of black thing with little legs and orange splodges on it. It looks like a cartoon character." And these became my friends. These were my friends in the garden. They eat black fly, which is not the gardener's friend. So I was very careful to sort of, be very kind and gentle to these little creatures. And then a few weeks ago, ladybirds started to emerge in the garden. And I noticed that they didn't look like the ladybirds of my childhood. And somebody told me that actually these larvae are an invasive species that has pretty much knocked out the classic English ladybird. And suddenly, these little larvae, they were no longer cute little cartoon characters, but they suddenly took on for me a grotesque sort of bullying character. And the actual ladybird itself, which isn't red and it's sort of built a bit like a tank, a tiny tank, it became this kind of enemy just overnight, just because somebody told me about how they've knocked my childhood friends off the map, kind of thing. And I think there's something very, very interesting there, that a person, a creature can be a friend one day and then flip into an enemy the next. So why am I telling that story? What's the moral of that story? Well, in a way, I can't change the way I feel about that creature, but I can disidentify with the ill will, actually. I can sort of hold it in a broader awareness. I can sort of step back and see that there is pushing away aversion, that it's kind of mind-made, this ill will. It may still play itself out, but I've got a bigger perspective. And that is born of my practice of Metta Bhavana and my practice of recollection and mindfulness that has been cultivated by the practice. And I can choose what I do with my ill will. I can choose not to sort of attack these innocent creatures. So I have I've come to a level of self-awareness that gives me choice. And also I am able to notice the painful sensations that go with feeling ill will. I can notice those. I can explore that. I can feel that in the body. I can see how it manifests in the mind. I can see how it constricts the mind. And I can choose to disidentify with it, to sort of step out of it and expand. So it's a relatively trivial example that I've given you. How can this transform your life? How can this practice transform your life? But I think it really can if we commit ourselves to this practice as a regular discipline. It can actually, in quite fundamental ways, transform your relationship, not just with yourself, but with others. When I started learning to meditate, I think one of the key areas of difficulty I experienced was a real struggle feeling at home in my own family. I really struggled with that. And actually, I think I still do to some extent. However, I have really made progress with that as a consequence of this practice, because I've learned learned to renounce blaming and ill will and anger, and discovered the value of looking within and connecting with the more complex, vulnerable, tender feelings associated with the disappointment that I've experienced in relation to my family. And that gives me much more kind of mental and emotional space. It helps me to make choices. And my relationship with my mother has actually been completely transformed by this, for which I'm extremely grateful. So, self-awareness can change your life. Meditation can change your life. Combination of the Metta Bhavana and the mindfulness of breathing brings you into a realm of a rich and sort of potentially transformative experience of your life. So, I think I've spoken enough for this evening. What I suggest we do is we practice together for 20 minutes. So if you would like to, please find a seat and settle in. So I will lead us in a period of the Metta Bhavana. And I encourage you to keep it quite simple and just see if you can explore this idea of the direct experience of yourself in your body, in your feelings, in your emotions. So beginning by closing your eyes, feeling the weight of your body on the floor, letting the lower half of your body be heavy and solid and stable. And then just letting the spine rise up, shoulders dropping back and down, letting the chest emerge, letting it expand a little. Sort of physically freeing the heart center, relaxing the shoulders, letting the elbows drop down like pendulums, hands soft, at rest, lengthening and loosening the back of the neck. Tilting the face a little towards the floor so the chin tucks under. Just spending a few moments connecting with the breath. The ever-changing, soft process of the breath coming into the body, filling the lungs so the chest expands gently. And just letting the breath go. Metta Bhavana. So just beginning by seeing if you can come into a friendly and curious awareness of yourself sitting here, responding to the sound of my voice. Perhaps thoughts are proliferating. Perhaps you're enjoying the sound of my voice. Perhaps you're aware of the clothing against your skin. Just wishing yourself to be well. And as it were, sort of saying hello to yourself. How does it feel to be inhabiting this body just now? And what's alive for you? The room that you're in, is it your space? Is there something in it that belongs particularly to you? Just noticing how you are inhabiting your environment. Maybe there's something around you you'd like to own, to have, something that you don't like. How does it feel? How does it manifest in your experience? Physical, emotional, psychological. And when you're ready, seeing if you can just expand this awareness to include a good friend. Just keeping it quite simple, not anticipating how you're going to do this or why you're doing it, just making the effort to recollect your good friend. Perhaps inviting them into the room. Imagining them taking up some space in your room. You don't have to manufacture any particular feelings. The effort is in recollecting, bringing them to mind, and then just noticing what arises as a consequence. And if it becomes a bit heady, a little bit discursive, a little bit disconnected, just remembering to come back to the body and the breath. Renew that connection with yourself, and then expand out to your good friend. And then when you're ready, moving on to the neutral person, a familiar stranger, perhaps someone who lives on your street or in your building, who's never been into your room. How would it be to invite them in? Or at least open the door and say hello. Just noticing any subtle responses to that idea, perhaps some aversion, fear, subtle fear, disbelief. Just noticing that, seeing if you can bring this person more vividly to mind. Invite them in. Just noticing how the body responds. There may be tension arising. You might just lose contact, lose that sense of connection with the body. Just dropping back into the body, softening, connecting with the breath, and then renewing your effort. And then in the fourth stage, bringing to mind someone you find difficult, being quite sensitive with yourself. May not be a good idea to invite them into your room. The principle of the practice is to cultivate a kindly awareness of this person. Without dismissing your response, but also not getting tangled up and identified with your response, keeping a broad perspective. The difficulty lies with you, not with them. Keeping it gentle, coming back to the first stage if necessary. Staying embodied, softening, taking your time. There's no target or finishing line. It's quite simply an exploration. And then in the final stage, just bringing to mind all four people. Yourself, your good friend, the familiar stranger, and the person you find difficult. Each of them is reflecting back something of yourself, and each of them is a separate individual in their own right. Noticing what's yours and what's theirs. It's a kindly activity in itself. And then expanding your awareness to take in the people who are meditating with you, maybe people in your house, your street, creatures in your garden, all beings. And we aim to extend our well-wishing out as far as we can. And just for the last minute of the practice, letting go of the effort you've been making. Just taking the opportunity to sit for a few moments, just doing absolutely nothing, resting. And as I ring the bell, opening your eyes and coming out of the meditation posture. So we've got just a few minutes actually before there's an announcement I would like to make before we end. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or reflections that they'd like to share. I'm going to look at Liz now to see if there's anything coming up.
You've got a slight time lapse, so you might have to keep
Okay. Yeah.
But David just put in the chat box about people asking questions. Alison's just made the reflection that she loves your personal stories, they really resonated. That was useful.
Oh yeah,
Great
good.
metaphorical story. I was just thinking how helpful it is that you said about, sort of reminded us beforehand about the change that the practice can make over time. Because even now, even though I know that and that has been my experience, when I now think of a difficult person for a current experience, I forget that each time.
Yes.
And I go into the practice thinking, well, this won't work, it won't ever change. But actually, as soon as you relax around that a bit and think, no, I know this practice has got that potential.
Yeah.
You know, for transforming that.
Yeah.
And that's sort of helpful reminder of how what you find out about yourself in that process of how interlinked you are, or how you're projecting things onto the other person.
That's right. We don't really. That's right. I hope you heard what Liz was saying. I don't know if I can précis that, but she was saying how this is a practice that it has an extraordinary effect over time. Actually, so I think there was a bit of a turning point for me in the meditation practice, probably particularly actually around my mum, when I stopped trying to change anything. And resolved quite simply to sit with the way things actually were. Stop trying to change it and just sit with the way things actually were. And yeah, that was the magic. That was the kind of the open sesame moment in some ways. But of course, I wasn't aware of that at the time. It's only with the benefit of hindsight that I can see how, yeah, it's a very interesting thing, this practice. You have to do it without hope. She said, laughing. Yes.
Becca's just made a really lovely comment saying, thank you for the meditation. The Metta Bhavana has been a real lifesaver and helped us be more expanded and curious, as well as more aware of what's going on inside.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful practice, actually. Yeah, thank you for that, Becca. It is. I mean, I suppose in a way it has become my most beloved practice. I think I always felt much more confident with mindfulness of breathing, and often would do the Metta Bhavana sort of under duress, or actually for quite a period of time I would only do it on retreat or when I was being led, because I didn't quite trust myself to do it on my own. But now I'm much more confident of it. And I think actually it's fine. You just do it any way that works, and it will still work its magic. But that's not to say you don't benefit from really exploring it and becoming quite disciplined with it, actually, as well. Yeah.
We've got quite a few questions coming through now.
Oh, okay.
Alison was just asking about, do you rotate practices, or do you do just what you need in the moment if you're a regular meditator?
In principle, I rotate. In practice, it depends really on, and sometimes, I mean, I do the formal mindfulness of breathing and the Metta Bhavana as separate practices, but sometimes they sort of meet each other in the middle. And there are other practices as well that I do, but I think they balance each other. So, you know, in a way, mindfulness of breathing is indicated when you're very distracted. If I'm very distracted, if my mind is just going off in all directions, then I will do the mindfulness of breathing to sort of help me get focused. And then I'll be ready for the Metta Bhavana. Yeah. But they are, you can't really separate them out. They are opposite sides of the same coin.
Matthew says, thank you for that wonderful meditation talk. And Alison says that makes sense. Thank you for answering the question. But Matthew also asks, it's a bit of a complex question, so I'll read it to you. You might read it twice. On the topic of self-inquiry, I wondered if you had any thoughts on practices of looking back or glimpsing the self, a sort of non-dual sort of approach, and if metta mindfulness might offer different avenues. So Alison's saying she can't hear me, so you might have to repeat.
Okay.
They've got that in the chat anyway.
Yeah, that's in the chat. So I'm listening because I can't read the chat, but Liz is reading out Matthew's question. This whole area of recollection of the self. It's a very interesting question, Matthew. I would actually recommend that when you're practicing, because I think it's a very interesting question and something to be explored, I would explore it through writing off the cushion, maybe. But when I'm on the cushion, when I'm actually meditating, I think it's really good not to have too much of a plan, if you like, or too much of to see what arises in the moment. because the self, we only really are consciously aware of something like 1% of the self. So when you sit down to meditate, there's a whole lot of stuff that is waiting to come into your awareness that might kind of be inhibited by you having too much of a plan. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. Liz says it makes sense. I hope that makes sense, Matthew. So there's quite a few questions, I think, but we might be running out of time.
Yeah, we've got to the end of the questions.
Thank you for those. That was really, yeah.
Matthew's just written, it makes sense to me too. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Actually, I have got something quite exciting to say just now, which is that we've got a retreat coming up. We are going to be running a home retreat online, and it starts on the 2nd of August. It's for a whole week. If you are free to take that week off, and you'd like to come on retreat with us, please do come and book on. It's up on our website, isn't it, Liz? Yeah. If you're working, but you do have a little bit of time at the beginning and the end of the day, I think you could still come on this retreat and benefit from it. There'll be morning meditation, there'll be a morning session, there's an afternoon session and evening session. And I'll be on the retreat, and Liz will be on the retreat, and a few people from Cambridge Buddhist Centre. But we're actually sort of collaborating with London Buddhist Centre. So there will be teachers from the London Buddhist Centre also leading the morning classes. So there'll be Jnanavacha, Surya Gupta, Maitreya Bandhu, and Subhadra Mati, and others. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be rich, and I think it's going to be great fun if people from Cambridge come and join us on this retreat. So if you can, do sign up for that. It's free by donation. Everything that we're doing at the moment online is free. We don't feel that we can charge for what we're doing. We're slapping the paint on one day and then streaming the next. But we are a charity, and our income has almost completely collapsed since the beginning of lockdown. So we do really benefit enormously from any donations that you can make. I think Liz has probably put the donate page up, the connection for the donate page up on the website. £5 for tonight's session would be greatly appreciated. If you've got more, then give us more. And if you come regularly to our classes, think about taking out a standing order, because that will help us to plan into the future. We are now beginning to sort of really put in place an autumn programme, and we need all the help we can get to keep rolling this out. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we've got the opportunity to do that. So what we need is your support. So please do give if you can. I think I've said that enough times now. So just before we end completely, I just invite you to take just a minute to sort of take a sort of a minute's breathing space. So however you're sitting just now, just notice that. And sort of come back into the body. Just notice again the breath. Perhaps thoughts and feelings have been stimulated by the evening's activity. Just noticing that, congratulating yourself for having done the practice. It will benefit you and other beings, undoubtedly. And that's it for this evening. See you next week, and have a good weekend. Good night.